So a few weeks ago, I was in the middle of a really good creative flow. I was recording, I was writing, I was completely absorbed. And then I looked at the clock and it was almost 7:30 p.m. and I had promised to cook dinner and I haven't even started. So I rushed to the kitchen and then my phone rang. It was a really dear friend of mine and I knew, even as I picked it up, that the timing was wrong. But she called and something in me just went automatically. It was not a conscious decision. So she needs something, so I show up, regardless of what I was doing or regardless of what I needed. And we talked in circles for a while, and the thing she needed couldn't be done until Monday anyway. And eventually we hung up and I stood there with my vegetables half chopped and I felt stressful. And then I started laughing because you know what I had been recording literally minutes before she called. An audio for my membership about saying no. If that isn't life handing you your own material, I do not know what it is. I'm Femke, I'm founder of the Selfgentleness Academy, and I want to talk to you today about saying no, but probably not in the way that you've heard it before. Because most advice about saying no treats it as a skill. You have to practice the words, use the right tone, or have a script ready, and maybe that helps a little bit. But if you're someone who has tried all of that and still feels the guilt anyway, still feels that pull to say yes even when everything in you knows it's the wrong answer, then the problem isn't the skill. The problem is something underneath that. The reason saying no feels so hard for so many of us is that somewhere along the way we learned that our value to the people we love is connected to our availability, and that being needed is how we stay loved, and that saying no risks something, not just a moment but something bigger. So for me, that learning started really young. I was about 8 years old and my mother had left and my father commuted 3 hours a day, so I started cooking dinner every night so we could eat at a normal time. I really wanted to hold things together. And in doing that, I learned something that took me actually decades to unlearn, that love is something you earn through showing up for others, regardless of what you need yourself. Now, maybe your story is different, but if you're watching this video, I'd guess some version of that belief is familiar to you. So what actually helps? Not more practicing saying no, not a better script. What helps is starting to notice what happens inside you in the moment before you say yes. That split second, like when my phone rang and I picked it up before I even had made a decision, because there was no decision. It was just an old pattern running automatically. So that noticing, that tiny gap between the trigger and the response is where everything changes. Not because you then force yourself to say no, but because you start to see the pattern for what it is. Old conditioning. A belief that was once formed in a specific context a long time ago, and it has been running in the background ever since. And seeing it, really seeing it, is the beginning of being able to choose differently. This is what I call the self-gentleness perspective. Self-gentleness is the practice of radically accepting yourself as the most important person to consistently deserve your own gentleness. And one of the things that means in practice is this: your needs are not less urgent than other people's needs. Your timing matters. What you were doing before the phone rang matters. And it doesn't make you selfish. It makes you someone who is starting to include yourself in the equation. The guilt when you say no, that's not evidence that no was the wrong answer. It's evidence of how long you've believed that your value depends on saying yes. The guilt is the old belief doing its job. You can feel it and still know that no was right. So here's what I did that evening in the kitchen after I hung up and I took a breath. I didn't go to the self-criticism. I didn't go over all the ways I should have handled it differently. I noticed. I laughed a little, and then I let the stress settle and made dinner. And that's it. That's the whole practice. Just notice. Be gentle with yourself about what you see and come back to yourself. And over time, and I want to be honest about that, this is a process, it's not a fix, but the noticing gets faster, easier. The gap before the automatic yes becomes a bit bigger. And gradually, incrementally, you start to actually choose. And it's not something like mastering a skill, but it's changing your relationship with yourself. It's to shift it so enough that your own needs are real to you, are worth protecting, are worth factoring in. And if you're curious where you are in this process right now, I made a short quiz that might help you see yourself a little bit more clearly. You'll find the link below. And if this resonated, I would love for you to subscribe. I make one video every week, and this is exactly the kind of thing we go into. I will see you in the next one. Bye bye, with all my love.